Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're joining this brave young woman once again as she takes on another incredible restoration challenge. If you've watched our previous videos, you've seen her successfully bring several abandoned vehicles back to life. But this time, the challenge is on an entirely different level. Standing before her is not an ordinary car or a small truck. It's a massive, heavy-duty dump truck that once served as one of the main workhorses in mining sites and large coal operations. At first glance, the truck looks absolutely enormous. Its towering size and rugged frame are clear signs that it was built to handle some of the toughest working conditions imaginable. Day after day, it hauled tons of rock and earth across rough terrain, enduring endless hours of hard labor. After many years of relentless service, however, time has finally caught up with this giant machine, leaving visible scars all over its body. The truck was originally painted in a striking shade of green, but years of exposure to scorching sunlight, heavy rain, and harsh weather have faded the paint almost completely. Large patches of paint have peeled away, revealing bare metal underneath. Rust has spread across the body, creating reddish-brown streaks that cover much of the truck's exterior. From every angle, it looks worn out, neglected, and far beyond its prime. Just one look is enough to tell that this machine has spent countless years working under extremely demanding conditions. The exterior isn't the only thing showing its age. The front tires have completely deflated and now lie flat against the ground. Tires that once carried the tremendous weight of this giant truck are now unable to support it at all. Their condition suggests that the vehicle has been sitting abandoned for a very long time without any maintenance or care. Looking more closely, it's easy to conclude that this dump truck has likely reached the end of its service life. After years of hard work at the construction site, it was probably retired because repairing it became too expensive or because its performance no longer met operational requirements. To most people, it would simply be considered a pile of old steel waiting to be scrapped. Very few would believe that this giant machine could ever run again. What makes today's challenge even more fascinating is not just the size of the truck, but the person determined to restore it. Standing in front of this enormous machine is a young woman with a small frame, but an extraordinary amount of determination, patience, and mechanical skill. In previous restorations, she has repeatedly proven that as long as there is even the slightest chance of success, she refuses to give up. That determination is exactly why so many viewers eagerly look forward to every new project she takes on. This time, however, the task will be far more demanding than anything she has faced before. A heavy-duty dump truck is significantly more complex than an ordinary vehicle. Its engine is much larger, the drivetrain is built to withstand immense loads, and nearly every mechanical component is oversized and extremely heavy. Even removing a single part requires specialized tools, careful planning, and considerable effort. If the engine has seized or the fuel system has deteriorated after years of sitting idle, bringing it back to life will become an even greater challenge. Many of us are probably wondering whether the engine can still be started after all these years. Is the transmission still functional? What about the braking system, the axles, and the hydraulic components? Have they survived the years of neglect? Or are they too badly damaged to be repaired? These are questions that can only be answered once the restoration process begins. One of the most exciting things about projects like this is the uncertainty. No one knows what surprises are hidden beneath the rust. Every seized bolt, every damaged component, and every unexpected mechanical failure becomes another obstacle to overcome. Yet those very challenges are what make restoration so satisfying to watch, as we witness each problem being solved through patience, experience, and determination. Restoring a machine of this size will require many different stages. The team will first inspect the truck from top to bottom before carefully disassembling damaged components. Every part will need to be cleaned, repaired, or replaced if necessary. Once the mechanical systems have been restored, attention will turn to the truck's appearance, followed by the moment everyone has been waiting for, the first attempt to start the engine after years of complete silence. I believe many viewers are eager to see how this young woman will confront such an enormous mechanical beast. Where will she begin? Which problems will she tackle first? And perhaps the biggest question of all, Can this dump truck, once considered nothing more than scrap metal, roar back to life and drive under its own power again? If you're just as curious as I am, make sure to stay with us until the very end of this incredible restoration journey. Together, we'll witness every stage of the rebuild, every challenge overcome, and every transformation that brings this forgotten giant back to life. By the end of the video, this machine that once seemed destined for the scrapyard may once again become a powerful working dump truck, ready to conquer the toughest job sites. So without further delay, let's begin this amazing restoration adventure. After cleaning all the dust and dirt from inside the truck's cab, the young woman immediately faced another difficult challenge. While cleaning the cab required patience and attention to detail, this next task demanded much more physical effort. The dump bed was still filled with a large amount of hardened mud and standing water that had accumulated after the truck had been abandoned outdoors for many years. A closer look revealed that thick layers of mud still covered the entire dump bed. Years of exposure to rain and harsh weather had caused the mud to dry out and bond tightly to the steel surface. It had hardened into heavy, compact layers that would not simply slide out, even if the dump bed was raised. Before she could empty the truck, she first had to break apart the hardened mud with a shovel, loosening it piece by piece so it could eventually fall away when the bed was lifted. This was far more demanding than it looked. Every shovel full required considerable strength because the mud had become almost as hard as concrete. She repeatedly dug, pried, and lifted heavy chunks under the blazing sun, while sweat poured down her face and soaked her clothes. Even so, she never complained or slowed down, remaining focused on the task from beginning to end. Many people might think this is just a simple cleaning job, but in reality, shoveling heavy mud by hand under intense summer heat is exhausting work. Compared to those who spend their days in comfortable air-conditioned offices, her job is incredibly demanding. It requires not only physical strength, but also determination, endurance, and a willingness to keep going despite the harsh conditions. It is moments like these that make this restoration journey truly inspiring. Every shovel of mud she removes brings the truck one step closer to being revived. More importantly, it reflects the hard work, dedication, and perseverance behind every successful restoration. Her commitment to taking on such difficult work deserves genuine admiration and respect from everyone watching. After completely clearing the dump bed of mud and debris, the young woman wasted no time before moving on to one of the most physically demanding stages of the restoration, replacing the truck's front tires. At first glance, changing a tire might seem like a routine task, but when you're dealing with a heavy-duty dump truck, it becomes an entirely different challenge. Every component is significantly larger, heavier, and much more difficult to handle than those found on an ordinary vehicle. As you can see, these wheels had remained in place for many years while the truck was in service. The lug nuts had been tightened under tremendous pressure and had endured countless hours of heavy-duty operation on rough construction sites. Years of dirt, moisture, and rust had also caused them to seize tightly in place. Even before attempting to remove them, and it was obvious that this would not be an easy job. To loosen the lug nuts, she reached for a long breaker bar, a tool designed to provide extra leverage when dealing with stubborn fasteners. Even with the added leverage, however, the nuts refused to move. She had to put nearly all of her body weight onto the bar just to break the first one loose. Only after applying tremendous force did the lug nut finally begin to turn. That alone showed just how tightly the wheels had been secured over the years. Each front wheel is held in place by 10 large lug nuts, meaning she had to remove a total of 20 heavy-duty nuts before the wheels could come off. Every single one required patience, strength, and determination. Without using proper leverage and carefully applying her body weight, removing all 20 nuts would have been an enormous challenge, especially for someone with a smaller build. What impressed me the most was the way she approached the task. She never relied on brute strength alone. Instead, she understood exactly how to position the tool, where to apply pressure, and how to use leverage to her advantage. Every movement was calm, controlled, and confident, reflecting the experience she has gained from working on large machines. Once all the lug nuts had been removed, the job was far from over. Before the wheels could be taken off, she had to lift the entire front end of the truck using a hydraulic jack. Considering the enormous weight of a heavy-duty dump truck, this step required great care. Choosing the correct lifting point and raising the vehicle safely was essential. A small mistake at this stage could easily lead to a dangerous situation. With the truck safely lifted, the next challenge was removing the wheels themselves. Unlike ordinary passenger vehicle tires, these wheels are enormous. They feature thick steel rims and heavy-duty tires designed to carry extreme loads under harsh working conditions. As a result, each wheel is incredibly heavy. I estimate that each wheel weighs at least 50 kilograms, and possibly even more, depending on its exact size and construction. For most people, especially someone working alone, moving a wheel of that weight would require another person or specialized lifting equipment. Yet once again, she surprised everyone. Rather than trying to force the wheel off with raw strength, she carefully rocked it back and forth to free it from the hub before gradually pulling it away. Every movement was smooth, controlled, and surprisingly effortless. Watching her work, it almost seemed as though the massive wheel wasn't heavy at all. What truly stands out is that her success doesn't come from physical strength alone. More importantly, she understands proper mechanical techniques. She knows how to use the wheel's own weight to her advantage, how to maintain balance, and how to reduce unnecessary effort through correct body positioning. These practical skills allow her to complete jobs that many people would consider impossible. Throughout the entire process, she remained calm and focused. Despite working under the hot sun and performing physically exhausting tasks, she never appeared impatient or frustrated. Every step was carried out carefully because she understood that safety and precision are far more important than speed. Perhaps that is why so many viewers enjoy watching her restoration projects. She doesn't rely on dramatic performances or exaggerated reactions. Instead, she quietly lets her hard work, skill, and determination speak for themselves. That authenticity is what makes her work so inspiring. Watching her loosen, stubborn lug nuts, safely lift the truck, and remove wheels weighing dozens of kilograms, it's hard to believe that all of this is being accomplished by a young woman working with such confidence. What she demonstrates is not only physical endurance, but also mechanical knowledge, problem-solving ability, and remarkable perseverance. What do you think of her performance during this stage of the restoration? Do you think you could handle a task like this on your own? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your opinions. Now let's continue watching as she takes on the next steps in bringing this enormous dump truck back to life. After successfully removing the old front tires, the young woman began installing the new ones. At first glance, this step might seem straightforward since it is essentially the reverse of the removal process. However, in reality, installing the wheels was no easier. Every step still required tremendous strength, patience, and precision to ensure the truck would be safe and reliable once it was back in operation. The first challenge was positioning each massive wheel back onto the hub. Each tire weighed dozens of kilograms, making it difficult to align the mounting holes perfectly with the wheel studs. Even a slight misalignment could make the installation much more difficult. Thanks to her experience and careful technique, she patiently adjusted the wheel until it was perfectly seated in place. Once the wheel was correctly positioned, she began threading each lug nut by hand before tightening them in the proper sequence. This is one of the most important steps in the entire process because the safety of the vehicle depends on how securely the wheels are fastened. If the lug nuts are not tightened properly, the wheel could become loose during operation. On the other hand, tightening them unevenly could place unnecessary stress on the wheel assembly and reduce its overall stability. Just as she had done during the removal process, she once again relied on a long breaker bar to generate enough leverage. Every time she tightened a lug nut, she leaned nearly her entire body weight onto the bar to ensure it was as tight as possible. Her movements were steady, deliberate, and full of determination, clearly showing how much physical effort this job required. What impressed me the most was that despite the demanding work, she never lost her focus. She carefully checked every lug nut before moving on to the next one, making sure nothing was overlooked. Her attention to detail demonstrated not only her experience, but also her strong sense of responsibility for doing the job correctly. As the work continued, I noticed that her hair had become soaked with sweat. Beads of sweat ran down her face under the blazing sun, making it obvious just how physically exhausting this task really was. Working on heavy machinery outdoors in such intense heat is never easy, yet she never complained or slowed down. Instead, she continued working with remarkable determination until every lug nut was fully tightened. Many viewers may only see a few minutes of footage and assume that changing these tires is a simple task. In reality, replacing two enormous dump truck wheels requires tremendous effort, from loosening stubborn lug nuts and handling wheels that weigh well over 50 kilograms to tightening every fastener with maximum force. It is a job that demands not only physical strength, but also patience, experience, and careful attention to detail. Her perseverance throughout this process is truly inspiring. Every step she completes brings the restoration one step closer to success, proving once again that determination, skill, and hard work can overcome even the toughest mechanical challenges. After successfully replacing the front tires, the young woman did not rush to start the engine. Instead, she followed the correct restoration procedure by moving on to one of the most critical stages of the entire project, inspecting and restoring the truck's electrical system. This is a step that cannot be skipped on any vehicle that has been left abandoned for years. No matter how good the engine may be, the truck cannot operate properly if the electrical system is not functioning correctly. Her first task was to reconnect the battery and restore power to the vehicle. After sitting unused for such a long time, the battery had obviously been disconnected or removed to prevent further damage. Before checking any other components, she needed to make sure the truck's electrical system was receiving a stable power supply. She carefully connected the battery terminals, tightened each connection securely, and inspected every contact point to ensure there were no loose connections or poor electrical contact. To many people, connecting a battery may seem like a simple job. In reality, however, it requires both knowledge and attention to detail. Connecting the terminals incorrectly or accidentally creating a short circuit could damage electrical components or even create a dangerous situation during the repair process. That is why she worked slowly and methodically, making sure every step was completed correctly before moving on. Once the truck had electrical power again, she began inspecting the main wiring circuits. Heavy-duty dump trucks operate in extremely harsh environments, constantly exposed to dust, vibration, mud, and rain. After years of service, electrical connectors often become corroded, rusty, or loose. Even a single faulty connection can prevent the entire electrical system from working properly. She carefully opened the electrical junction boxes and inspected each connector, terminal, and major wiring harness one by one. Every component received her full attention before she continued to the next. Sometimes, nothing more than a thin layer of corrosion or accumulated dirt is enough to interrupt the electrical flow. Knowing this, she made sure no connection was overlooked. To make the inspection more accurate, she used a test light to check whether electrical current was reaching each circuit correctly. Although it is a simple tool, it is one of the most valuable diagnostic instruments during vehicle restoration. Within seconds, it can reveal whether a circuit is receiving power or whether there is a fault somewhere along the wiring. This allows electrical problems to be located much faster and more accurately. Whenever she discovered something unusual, she never ignored it. Instead, she patiently traced each wire, examined every connector, and carefully inspected every contact point until she identified the source of the problem. This systematic approach not only prevents unnecessary repairs, but also saves a significant amount of time later in the restoration process. Overall, the electrical system of this dump truck is not especially complicated compared to modern commercial vehicles equipped with dozens of electronic control modules, sensors, and computerized systems. However, that certainly does not mean it is easy to repair. Successfully diagnosing automotive electrical problems requires a solid understanding of wiring diagrams, circuit operation, and the proper use of electrical testing equipment. Without that knowledge, even a small electrical fault can become a major challenge. What impressed me most was how confidently she handled every part of the inspection. She never appeared confused while checking the wiring or testing the electrical connections. Every movement was calm, organized, and purposeful, suggesting that she has gained considerable experience working on heavy machinery. Rather than checking random components, she followed a logical sequence, starting with the power supply, then moving through the primary electrical circuits before inspecting individual systems. There may still be additional problems hidden inside this truck after years of abandonment. A machine of this age rarely suffers from only one fault. However, judging by the way she works, with patience, technical knowledge, and a clear step-by-step process, I believe she will solve each problem one at a time. Every wire she inspects, every connector she cleans, and every electrical fault she repairs brings this giant machine one step closer to running again. This is also one of the most important stages of the entire restoration. Once the electrical system is functioning properly, the next steps, testing the starter, checking the engine, and attempting the first engine start, will become much easier. Although this stage may not be the most visually exciting part of the project, it forms the foundation for everything that follows. Let's continue watching to see whether this talented young woman can successfully restore the truck's electrical system and move this massive machine one step closer to roaring back to life after years of being forgotten. After completing the inspection and restoration of the electrical system, the young woman finally reached the moment everyone had been waiting for. The first attempt to start the engine of this massive dump truck. This was a crucial moment because it would reveal whether all of the hard work completed so far had brought the truck any closer to coming back to life. She climbed into the driver's seat, carefully checked the controls and electrical system one last time, and then turned the ignition key. The starter motor immediately came to life, confirming that the battery and starting system were functioning properly. However, the result was not what anyone had hoped for. Although the starter motor cranked the engine strongly, the engine itself showed absolutely no sign of firing. The truck remained completely silent, as if it was still unwilling to wake up after years of sitting abandoned. For many viewers, this outcome might seem disappointing. After hours of physically demanding work, everyone naturally hopes to hear the engine roar back to life on the very first attempt. However, for experienced mechanics and vehicle restorers, this is actually a very common situation. A heavy-duty truck that has been out of service for many years rarely starts successfully after only a few basic repairs. The truth is that bringing a large diesel engine back to life requires every major system to work together perfectly. If even one critical component fails, the engine simply will not start. The problem could lie in the fuel delivery system, clogged fuel lines, the injection pump, air intake, fuel injectors, injection timing, engine compression, or any number of other mechanical components. Sometimes, even a relatively small fault is enough to keep the engine from running. That is why restoring an abandoned vehicle is never a matter of guesswork. Every system must be inspected carefully and in the proper sequence. A skilled mechanic has to observe symptoms, perform tests, eliminate possible causes one by one, and eventually identify the real source of the problem. This process requires logical thinking, practical experience, and great attention to detail. What impressed me the most was that the young woman never showed any sign of frustration after the first unsuccessful attempt. Instead of repeatedly cranking the engine or making random adjustments, she calmly stopped, analyzed the symptoms, and prepared to continue inspecting the remaining systems. That calm and methodical approach is one of the most valuable qualities any mechanic can have. Restoring a vehicle that has been abandoned for years demands much more than mechanical knowledge or an understanding of automotive electrical systems. It also requires extraordinary patience. Some faults can take hours or even days to diagnose correctly. During that time, every possibility must be tested carefully until the true cause is finally discovered. There are no shortcuts in a restoration project of this scale. Beyond technical skill, this work also demands remarkable physical endurance. Most of the job is performed outdoors under intense sunlight while dealing with dirt, grease, rusted components, and heavy mechanical parts. Every stage requires considerable effort, yet she continues working with determination and refuses to give up. It is this perseverance that gives abandoned machines a second chance, instead of allowing them to end up as scrap metal. In my opinion, this is an incredibly meaningful profession. Rather than allowing old vehicles to rust away in junkyards or be cut apart for scrap, she invests her time, knowledge, and hard work into bringing them back to life. Every successful restoration not only revives a machine, but also helps reduce waste, conserve valuable resources, and extend the useful life of equipment that still has plenty to offer. The value created by her work reaches far beyond the truck itself. The previous owner benefits because a vehicle that once seemed worthless regains its value. The new owner receives a fully restored machine at a much lower cost than purchasing a brand new one. And, of course, the young woman herself is fairly rewarded for the skill, effort, and dedication she has invested throughout the restoration process. Her restoration videos also provide tremendous value to viewers. They are not only entertaining to watch, but also educational. As the audience follows each repair step, they gain a deeper understanding of how heavy vehicles operate, how mechanical systems function, and how experienced mechanics diagnose and solve complex problems. For some viewers, these videos become more than just entertainment. They become a source of inspiration. Watching her overcome difficult mechanical challenges encourages many people to learn more about vehicle maintenance and repairs. Some even gain the confidence to perform basic maintenance or repair work on their own vehicles instead of relying entirely on repair shops. That makes her content valuable not only for its entertainment, but also for the practical knowledge and motivation it provides. Although the first attempt to start the engine was unsuccessful, it certainly does not mean the restoration has failed. In fact, this is simply another step toward identifying the real problem and eventually bringing this giant machine back to life. With her patience, technical expertise, and determination, I have no doubt that this powerful dump truck will eventually roar back to life once again. Let's continue watching to see how she overcomes the next challenge and whether the long-awaited moment of hearing this forgotten engine run again is finally just around the corner.